want to find my house, you must answer the questions I ask of you. Does death bring peace or suffering?
Peace, because pain is subjective. You would feel no more pain just as before you were born.
Would you prefer anonymity over notoriety?
In this day of age, with government watching everything you do, and in social groupings always one person away from being the next YouTube joke because you tripped over some stairs, yeah, I'll go with being unknown.
Do you feel victory when your words cause pain?
Yes, most do. It's a human condition. We delight in the suffering of others.
Do you take that which you know you will not return?
No.
Is betrayal caused by inequality or injustice?
Betrayal is subjective to a circumstance. Injustice in ranks and positions of power lead to inequality. We do an injustice to society by having so much inequality. From the mind. The heart is a muscle used to pump blood, not process thoughts upon which we react to our own wants or needs. Sin is a man-made construct to shift blame of our actions. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, I am SocioPsycho and this is Mob Reviews, and today we're going to look at The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, available for PC, created by The Astronauts. It is a first-person exploration, adventure, detective, narration-based game. How well does it actually manage to pull that off? And that's what we'll dive into here today. And we'll begin in the options menu. Now, when we get into the options menu, one thing I do like is when we go into the controls, you can see already they have a large berth of what you can play around with, as well as the key and mouse settings, all rebindable. Love it! So we have that. We're off to a good start. When we come to the graphics, we have a large berth of screen resolutions, and the resolution scale, a couple other options as you can see, field of view slider as well, love it, and a brightness slider. So on top of there being a large berth of screen resolutions and other choices, you can see it definitely meets up to a requirement. Now I've found the game to be running at 60 frames per second with no tearing, clipping, or crashing. And quite frankly, the game is beautiful, and we'll talk about that when we talk about atmosphere in level design. And lastly, we have the sound sliders. The voice acting is done very professional, and the music really helps keep and propel a atmosphere in the aesthetic of a world. I find it very difficult, and one of the few genres of games that I really distaste is heavy exploration games, but the music in this was so enwrapping, so involving, just on point of it parts where it needed to be to really entice and wrap the player up into the world. It fit perfectly. That is not me blowing it out of proportion, that's not me being modest, that's not me trying to flatter or kiss ass. The game, musically, is one of the best that I've seen in pairing up what happens on screen with what you hear. It sets the tone and atmosphere perfectly. So when we jump in here, the first thing we're going to talk about is the story. Now, as I stated, this game is a narration detective game. And the story, while I will not spoil anything for you, so you do not have to worry about that, the story is where you are a character named Paul, I forget the last name, and you are a detective who looks in on cases which have a supernatural element to them. The Vanishing of Ethan Carter is done so in a murder case and supernatural element, where the town that you're going to investigate, where you hear sort of a psionic wave that draws you there to save this boy, finding that the town has been covered in a string of murders, and there is a sleeper, some sort of mystical creature that is whispering into the ears of the townsfolk, driving them insane. That is your baseline to progress through the game to find out the clues and adventure. And I will state that the game starts off by saying that it does not hold your hand. It quite literally puts you into the world and says figure it out for yourself. Now when it comes to a story element throughout the game, I am perfectly fine with being able to figure things out for myself and to be given that responsibility and respect. Too many games are afraid of letting the player loose because they want them not to get bored, or they feel that they can better circumvent the entertainment of the player if they put them on their strict rails. The only criticism I really have for the way that they've delivered the story to the player is simply not really giving enough information based upon who you are. You are there to detect. This is fairly obvious. You are a detective. But it really doesn't dive into any further of those questions or allow any emotional building in between you and your character. You detect throughout the story what has happened in a village, where the next crime is, the circumstances behind what is happening. You piece the story together in a narrational and visual cutscene area upon completion of your tasks, detective-wise, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But the question is not who is Ethan Carter and why am I here to find him. Obviously that is answered by the supernatural element in the world. And being a detective, you sort of have that element of this is my speciality. But beyond the first little introduction into the world we have with this character, that's really all we know about him, that he is a detective of the supernatural. There's no real backstory, there's no connectivity, there's no reason or explanation as to why he's here. And you may argue, if you've beaten the game, that it ties in rather well with the ending, and like I said, it will not spoil anything for you. But having the character have a backstory, one that the player can actually connect with more, only enriches the ending. It doesn't belittle it, and it doesn't fall out of the characterizations. I enjoyed the story, in truth. The continuational advancements of what I found and saw kept me wanting to progress forward, to adventure more, to find out more clues, to see the next part of the story. It is only in the narration of understanding what you as the detective want to do that I have a problem with. And it's simply because you're not allowing me to get into the mindset exactly of a detective who is of this supernatural characterization. Now, I don't mean that he needs to run around the map narrating every 5 seconds that, oh, this ground is squishy, there seems to be some sort of unnatural wind in the air, or yada yada yada. But certain points and cues within the time frame which may not give an opinion objectifiably to what he thinks of the situation, leave that to the player, but rather what he's looking for as a detective. Draw us in to what his mind process thought should be, so that we ourselves can actually become the detective, not just be the player. And that's the key factor of difference. The game sets up a wonderful story, but it's still just a story. It doesn't feel like an interactive adventure. The story is good, the story is exciting and wonderful to unravel, but it doesn't immerse you into it hand in hand to a degree of you. You are the detective. By gameplay, sure, you are doing the tools necessary in order to figure out what's happened in a crime scene. But when you get stuck, when you come up to something new, you don't really have that continuational understanding that, hey, you are a detective. Hey, this is what you should look for, or this is what you should expect from a seasoned veteran supernatural detective. As I said, that doesn't really make the story any less of what it is, but it doesn't take it that extra step that it could have been. And what can make up for that discrepancy that can sort of draw players out of the world, and that would be the world itself, in order to draw them back. The world is beautiful. This game is an artistic piece of work. Dare I say, even a masterpiece in the graphic fidelity. Now, there have been some issues on Steam, but I've noticed that some people having some problems with a certain computer configuration not running as smooth as it should. But what I've also noticed are the devs' love and joy and hard work in fixing these issues. The world is beautiful. The atmospheres, the sounds, almost all are amazing. There's a couple points as when you're in the mines and you hear wind howling through. There's no story reason for wind to be howling into the bottom of cavern mines. It sounds more like you're in a forest or a mountaintop region rather than in a dark, stanky mine shaft. But outside of that location, the music is what really draws in the player to the atmosphere beyond just the lovely and very artistic world itself. The world is one part linear, second part open, and it's a little confusing to say that because there are some points where to progress you only have one direction in order to go. But in other aspects, in figuring out a clue or a case that you may have passed by, it's not. The world is an open world in its where you decide to go next. What freedom of movement you have due to there not being any limitations on your progression via the gameplay. You don't need to put together some murder clues or find a story or some variation in order to progress to the next stage. You can go wherever you want, but the story does arc in a fashion that requires you to find and finish these elements. You're not bound by a structure or construct of completing a certain detective part in order to progress forward. The world is a beautiful, open, explorational playground, allowing you to really enhance your own sense of adventure. And it comes down to the atmosphere. As I said, if you're in a forest and the wind is blowing and the trees are swaying, or the grass is moving, if you're in a mine shaft and the music turns to a bit more creepy or horror-esque, there's this sensation and feeling that fits the mood that they want you to be in. The first part of the game is a little creepy, there is no doubt about that. The level design picks and arcs it rather well. You start off with murders and trying to figure out what exactly is happening here. And as the story progresses forward, it becomes more apparent that there is definitely a darker side or a darker entity responsible for these happenings. There's one part in particular where I would believe that the game sort of crosses over into horror / stealth for the level design element. It is a small part in the bottom of a mine shaft where you have to sort of sneak around in a way or fashion as simply not running into the patrolling enemy, who will kill you in one shot. And that is the beautiful element that apparently a lot of stealth games don't understand, or even horror games. If you want somebody to be afraid, then offer the gamble and risk of all the progression via the last save point to be whisked away if they should be careless and die. As it retains back to the earlier statement of the first thing you see when you load the game up, that it does not hold your hand. This element of fear and horror that helps propel the urgency of the darkness, the element of madness, really hits home. I've played a lot of horror games in my time, and the majority of them don't even make me raise an eyebrow. And I was not expecting this game to be that sort of element. I was expecting a spooky atmosphere, which it does, with the level design to the murders and the town investigation. The supernatural element of, okay, what are we facing? It's not a combat game, so it has to be some sort of story plot that ties you in and gives you goosebumps. Well, it did for me anyways. But horror, or a sense of fear or dread, was the last thing that I ever thought I would feel from this game. And yet there was a point when I was running around in those mines where I saw the monster and he crossed path to the way I wanted to go. And I said to myself, I stopped my character, my progression, my movement, where I was. And I said to myself out loud, what the fuck are you doing? Don't be a pussy, keep moving. For a split second, my body's reaction was to stop and try to assess the situation in a manner of, how do I get out of here? Before my mind bitch slapped me and said, no, we have a mission to do, shut the fuck up and keep trucking on. That is a rarity for a game to, or an experience in life even, to make me have that sort of response. No matter how short-lasting it was, it's still rare. Would I consider the entirety of a game a horror game? Absolutely not. But for the first majority half, goosebumps and that one incident. And then it dies down more into detective and the story flourishes up. The game is not overly long. You're looking about 4 to 10 hours on average, depending on your speed and what you're looking for, achievements, and how much you want to complete, of course. But my point being is this. The level design within the world ties together almost perfectly, not perfectly, but almost as a whole to just create an environment that fits the theme of the game. Which brings us to the detective manner of this game. The detective element that you face is rather small, and it doesn't really have a narrational clue in as to how the mechanics work. And unfortunately, without really knowing what you're looking for or what pieces of a puzzle that you're seeking due to the lack of narrational guidance that we've talked about in story, about you not really feeling like a detective rather than you just playing as your personal self with the tools available. The detective element of a game comes down to finding and picking up the items within the world. It does one part fall into a scavenger quest for certain items. Unfortunately, you will need to find that one item on the beach that's hidden in rocks in order to progress one of the murder scenes. Is it a huge aspect to the story? No. Will it stop your gameplay and progression overall? No. But on a personal level of not being able to complete a murder case perhaps as fast as you may like because you just can't find that item, you understand the causation of what's happened, you understand how to put the pieces together, you understand in what segments the situation unraveled, and you learn more about the story in doing so. It's really just the scavenger quest of finding items, which can be a little daunting because you don't really know exactly where these items are, and unfortunately, that you may even need them. Now, this is a personal anecdote of myself, but many times I'd end up finding an item that was related to a murder case randomly before even realizing that that item was for the murder case. It did lead to some backtracking, which did lead to some annoyance for me personally. But when it comes to the detective element of a game, whether it be a puzzle that you need to find the correct combination, which is done in a very elegant fashion, I would say, or by piecing the clues together in a crime scene, the detecting aspect is good. The scavenger hunt, not so much. But I'm not suggesting that they hand walk you to it. I just don't like scavenger questing. Which leads us to actually one of the larger elements of a game, exploration. This game has a lot of small nuances and out of the way detective crime scenes and story progressional points that you need to find throughout this open world. Exploration plays a huge role in this game. It goes beyond just the scavenger quest element of the game, which ties into the detective, because the exploration isn't just about finding an item to get through a door. The exploration is in everything. Your exploration throughout the world to adventure and immerse yourself into the atmosphere, to see the landscape, to listen to the water, to hear the breeze on the trees, to find the hidden notes within certain locations that progress parts of the story. The exploration of the game transcends the scavenger quest elements of the game because everything about the game is about exploration, adventure, to find out and see what is there right around the corner, over that rock, around the tree, down by the river. And this is where me and the game sort of have a slight issue, because I don't really like exploration games overall. I find them rather boring, honestly. The continuational job through different regions and environments just to find that one piece of paper, that one clue that really has no prelude to it being there other than it is there and you need to find it. Exploration for the mere purpose of exploration has never been something that I've really enjoyed. That tied in, unfortunately, with the detective element of scavenger questing, really put me into a mindset of annoyance at certain time. But what is very important to understand is that the atmosphere in this game is so strong, and the music that ties it all together is so well done, as I said, perfectly done, that I kept playing despite my default dislike of those game mechanics. I went into this game knowing it was going to be an explorational game, and that's important. You have to have a right mindset going into a game, otherwise you'll be disappointed. And this game is very heavy on exploration. As I said, every facet of this game, its design, its element to savor the world is done so by exploration. That does not mean the game is bad for it. The game does it in a very beautiful and elegant way.
Here in Red Creek Valley, the first you walked into, and with any luck, walked out of. But the other darkness was deeper, stickier, unknowable. And it wanted me to leave.
So at the end of the day, you have a story which I have a slight discrepancy in, where you don't really immerse as the detective rather than just being told you're the detective. Other than that, the story helps arc throughout the entirety of the world, pushed along with the atmosphere in a very beautiful masterpiece universe. The elements that you come across, I just can't say it enough. They are very well done. The themes, the music, the settings all fit to what they're going for. A sense of eerie, perhaps, a sense of horror, fear, goosebumps, relaxation, wonder, joy, excitement, fear, whatever emotion that the different situation may instill in you, the music is there to help guide that. Overall, I found the detective elements of the game to rather be simplistic. They weren't bad, but they weren't anything amazing. They fit the theme of the game, and the game is more exploration than it is detective, and so I didn't really mind the simplistic nature of the detective element because it was true to its stronger points, which is exploration and world adventure. This game is a delightful open world exploration, and while I typically don't really enjoy these styles of games, I did enjoy this one. I had a decent time in it, and I found it respected my time. So ladies and gentlemen, this is an easy recommend, but you have to enjoy exploration. If you do not enjoy exploration at any point in time, then getting immersed into a world will be harder. Not impossible, as I did enjoy it with that same discrepancy for exploration, but it will be harder. And seeing how it is $20 on Steam, you may wish to wait and save for it, or you may wish to go for it. It depends on your price point versus value on exploration and gameplay. And what I mean by that is, if a game is a detective game, first and foremost, how much do you appreciate and like a detective game equal to the price versus the hour rate for that experience? So are you willing for 5 to 10 hours to pay $2 an hour roughly, or $3 an hour for an explorational adventure? That's up to you. I enjoyed this game. It is an easy recommend. I have been SocioPsycho, this has been Mob Reviews. I thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.